Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to look at the interview that Candus did with Chris McDonough. It's about 40 minutes long. I'll put a link in the description, although I'm sure you've seen it already. And we're going to kind of ask the question, do you believe her? And apparently a lot of people have changed their minds about Candus based on this interview. Through the grapevine, I've heard that there's been a sea change in the public perception of Candus. Now people think she's innocent and Dons or Macbeth are guilty. It's amazing what a nice clean t-shirt with the appropriate aphorism on it can do, isn't it? I mean, isn't it precisely because Candus wasn't performing mom patrol that something happened to Summer? Well, let's find out. Before we get to today's episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. You can click on the light blue icon on the bottom right of your screen. Like, share, leave a comment. If you can't leave a comment, if it's disabled, just head on to Twitter and join the discussion there. Or join Patreon at patreon.com/TCRS. And let's get started. So in this episode, I'm going to take you into the details of the interview. In other words, we're going down into the woods and we're going to examine the trees, the details. I'm going to do a follow-up episode, so kind of a part 2 to this analysis, where we'll come out of the details and look at how the woods, the shape, the size, and the configuration has shifted.
Worth playing for?
Yeah.
So I've highlighted 10 inconsistencies. They're actually more than that. But one of the first statements Candus made that certainly got my attention was that they chose the secluded spot because they wanted to be private for health reasons, for social distancing reasons, because of coronavirus. Wow, I hadn't thought of that. Does that change anything? Does that change everything? That's actually a woods observation, but I wanted to highlight that here to begin with. We'll come back to this, to that particular observation in the next episode. So let's start off with the first one. Grandma went down to the water's edge. I was surprised to hear that Grandma actually came down with Summer and Macbeth and Candus herself to the edge of the swimming hole. Chris McDonough expressed surprise too, noting despite her knee and the pain, she walked down here on this spot on this uneven and slippery terrain. Well, according to Candus, she did. I didn't catch when she went back to the vehicle, but I think what this sets up is Grandma basically being shoehorned in as Candus's witness. That impression is being reinforced more and more. I don't know if you've noticed that. Not only that Grandma can confirm Candus's version, but her kids too. Legally, this could create a problem for a prosecutor. Now, a final point to make in this regard is one moment Grandma is in the hospital, she's having her knee treated. One almost has the sense that it's an emergency, and she's also getting pain medication. The next thing, she's up on her feet and she's wandering around and there's not a problem, right? That's the swimming hole scenario. She's running around, Grandma's running around the swimming hole. And the other problem is when they're back at the ranch, back at the house, Grandma's planting flowers. So there, once again, Grandma is basically back, fully healed and kind of, running around. She does acknowledge that when the family was searching for Summer, that Grandma just hollered. So there is a little bit of an acknowledgement there that Grandma wasn't running around in the Ben Hill Road property. The driveway is pretty steep and so on. The second inconsistency is that Macbeth called Candus while she was in the parking lot of the hospital. Now, you might not think that's a very big deal, but it goes to this very shaky area of time and to some extent intent. So in the latest version of events, Candus says Macbeth called her from the parking lot of the hospital. How she sketches it is she's the good daughter waiting for her mother, like diligently waiting for her mother, when Macbeth calls her and sort of lures her away. And he suggests they make better use of their time. Why don't they enjoy themselves? Why doesn't she come to his house? So in this version, it's A, Macbeth's idea that she comes over, B, that she's in the hospital parking lot when the idea is first brokered, and C, she has no idea that the swimming or fishing is going to be on the cards. So wouldn't expect Summer to be wearing or have a bathing suit with her or have fishing equipment in the vehicle. The other aspect that's interesting is that Candus acknowledges another timestamp here. She's at the hospital, she says, at 8 a.m., which is fairly early. What did she do between 8 and 10 a.m. when she arrived at Macbeth's home? Right? What happened in those 2 hours? It should also be noted in this respect that Macbeth and Candus likely did have a conversation at about 8 a.m. The question is where? Was it when she was still home or when she was in the parking lot, as she says? The call could have been a follow-up call from a prior arrangement made either the night before or during the night. We also know from Macbeth that he said he was awake the whole night. Macbeth's story was that Candus contacted him to say she'd been in town because she was taking her mother to the hospital, and she may have mentioned the prescription as well. So Macbeth's story is that Candus contacted him. Candus's story is that Macbeth contacted her. It's an important detail when the idea of the swimming hole came about and whose idea it was, because it provides an indication of intent. Where was the intent coming from? Whose idea was this? Number 3, I changed Summer at home. A major inconsistency that emerges now within Candus's story, within this story, is that she says she changed Summer into a bathing suit at home before they even left Ben Hill Road. Now I've got to say, when Candus says at home, I'm assuming it means at her home. I don't think she would say at home meaning Macbeth's home. I think at home means, if you're talking about your home, do you mean someone else's home or your home? And if it was someone else's home, wouldn't you say that? I actually believe this is true, but it contradicts Macbeth's story that Summer was changed inside Alison's home. And it also contradicts the impression that Candus only found out they were going swimming once she arrived at Alison's house. In other words, after supposedly calling Candus while she was in the parking lot, how could Summer already be in her bathing suit? I do think Summer changing into a bathing suit is a key moment because it also shows intent. And when this happens and who changes her is quite important. Did she change herself? Did Macbeth change her? Did she change our doors at the swimming hole? Does she even have a bathing suit? Once again, the vital question that needs to be asked and answered, can Summer swim? Well, it wasn't addressed in this interview. It still hasn't been answered, and it needs to be. Number 4, I can't remember his name. Now, I don't think this is really rocket science. I don't think it's a huge detail, but I think it is a kind of an obvious way to ask the question, is Candus being honest, right? She's asked a simple question, do you remember this guy's name? No, she can't remember his name. And so if she's not being honest about this little details, and you might say that's a bit harsh. Maybe she's not being transparent. Okay, if she's not being transparent about the little details, is she being transparent about the big details, like whether Summer was asleep or not? Alison and Candus were in a love triangle with Jose. Jose was Alison's man, and he ended up staying at Ben Hill Road, as I understand it, when Alison stayed there, and apparently Macbeth did as well. Plunder, the channel Plunder, has recently put up a video taken from Candus's TikTok showing Candus and Macbeth lying on a bed together, and I think that is at Candus's home. Alison can possibly confirm that. And someone else's hand, a child's hand, comes into view over them. How likely is it that Candus wouldn't remember her boyfriend's name? As soon as Chris reminds her, of course she does. Jose, oh yes, Jose. How likely is it that Candus wouldn't remember the dude who caused the rift between herself and her pal, one that still exists today? Interestingly, both Candus and Macbeth have used a similar way of explaining why they don't know certain things that they ought to know. Whether it's times, names, or other details, they tend to say something like, I wasn't paying attention. And yet they can be very attentive about other things. what she said when she told him they had to go home. She provides verbatim, kind of a quote from herself, I'm taking you home now, kind of thing. Where she parked, she's very clear about. Where there were flowers, the order of stops on June the 15th. Candus is very clear on the order of where they stopped, while Macbeth isn't really as clear. And that brings us to number 5. When Chris McDonough asks her, where, just sort of provide us with a sense of where everyone was. Where was Summer swimming? Where were you? Where was Grandma? Where was Macbeth? Well, Candus puts herself at the water's edge. According to Candus, she was a model mum while Summer was swimming, standing right on the water's edge, supervising, basically playing the lifeguard. According to Candus, there was no incident whatsoever. Summer didn't go underwater, didn't slip on the rocks, and she actually says there are no rocks here. Although Chris says, well, there are rocks there and there and there, kind of thing. But in any event, she says she didn't go underwater, didn't slip on the rocks, and so Candus didn't need to go into the water to rescue Summer. No one did, because the incident didn't happen. So that is a major departure from Macbeth's version of events. So you kind of got to ask yourself, who do you believe, Candus or Macbeth? She also protected Summer, according to her, from Macbeth, who was splashing her, as we see in the video. So in her story, Candus is the hero, just as in Macbeth's story, he is. The truth is likely that neither of them are heroes in the story of what actually happened. That's my opinion. Then, number 7, I bought a twisted tea for Grandma. You see what a handy witness an alibi Grandma is turning out to be. As long as she says nothing, as long as Grandma doesn't say anything and maintains her silence, anything Candus says can basically stand unopposed. It's her word and Grandma's by inference against Macbeth's and maybe anyone else's, right? Do you think that's true? Do you think that Candus bought a twisted tea for Grandma? What really stood out to me in McDonough's interview with Candus was the original statement that the swimming hole area was littered with trash. When I first heard that, I didn't really know what to make of that. I didn't know, did that mean, was that a way of saying we didn't swim very much? And now I think I know why she said that. It means any twisted teas found at the site weren't theirs. It was just litter. Any beers or something like that found there wasn't theirs. It was litter. I don't know about you, but looking at the area while they were there doing the interview, I wouldn't describe it as covered in garbage. It doesn't look terrible. There's certainly litter here and there, but it certainly doesn't. I wouldn't describe it as covered in litter. I also wouldn't say that Candus would be the type of person to care about that sort of thing very much, given the state of her own home, right? Number 8, Summer was still awake when I left his home. This is also another major departure and discrepancy between what Candus says and what Alison remembers, what Macbeth's mother remembers the last time that she saw Summer. And that's very important. The last time a third party saw someone is very important, and Candus is arguing with that. We've heard Candus make that claim before, and we know Alison disputes it. Macbeth says he wasn't paying attention when he said goodbye to his friend, this friend who was his friend because he paid so much attention to her. That's also what he said to McDonough. The real clue comes later when Candus says, we were 2 minutes from the house when she fell asleep. That's the real clue to test whether what Candus is saying is true. Or do you think it is? When her arms fell down, apparently they were 2 minutes from the house. And that was apparently when she fell asleep. Well, Tector Gorch's research clearly shows where that video was shot, and it was further than 2 minutes. I'm not exactly clear on how far it was. I think it was 11 minutes. I've been trying to get hold of Tector Gorch, having a little bit of problems there. But it was definitely longer than 2 minutes. The distance from Ben Hill Road to Murrell Road, which is identified in the background, that yellow sign and the trees is around about 11 minutes. So Candus is out by 10 minutes. Once again, when she doesn't want to, she can't provide any time. So when she does, she's quite specific. Saying that we were 2 minutes from home is pretty specific about time, isn't it? And I think she's wrong by at least 9 minutes, 9 or 10 minutes. In my opinion, Summer may have never made it back home on June 15th. Think about it. If something did happen at the swimming hole and whoever was responsible meant to cover it up, would it make sense to take a not alive Summer home or to dump her somewhere else? You're in the car, you're not at the home, you don't want the boys to see anything, you've got Grandma with you. The only other person in the vehicle was Grandma, and she could be counted on as possibly an alibi, couldn't she? And hasn't she been before? Hasn't she done that before? And that brings us to point number 9. I can show you he's made TikTok videos. To be honest, I didn't believe Macbeth when he said this, when he said that, he doesn't do that and he's not interested. I simply didn't believe him. I just thought, oh, so you have a phone, you're on the phone in your own version of events. You're watching TikTok videos with Candus and then with Summer, but you don't make them yourself. You appear in them, but you don't make them yourself. Yeah, right. I mean, we know he participated in them, so getting confirmation from Candus was certainly useful. I believe her. But she's not shy to throw him under the bus, is she? And that brings us to the final one, although there's a lot more that I could have highlighted. I'm just wanting to keep this short. Number 10, Summer was sleeping like this in the last photo. This was perhaps the most important and unlikely statement that Candus made. Have you ever seen a child sitting up straight, sleeping with both hands behind their heads? On a pillow lying down, perhaps. Sitting up straight, no chance. Candus role-played Summer's position twice and also gestured towards the watering hole as she described herself frantically searching for Summer, including driving off. We'll talk about that in more detail in the next episode, dealing with more general observations about the interview, which I think people will be surprised to see are far more telling and shocking. Her second role-play of Summer's position looked like this. Can you really imagine Summer's hands and arms, if they were originally in that position, ending up like this? I mean, look at her right arm, for example. It's not just flopped down in front of it, it's actually tucked kind of under the milk jug. And look at the left arm, her left arm. You would expect it to be more over her than the way it is, right? She's already slumped over in that screen grab. It's actually from a video. She's already slumped over. You would also imagine if she was tired and she wanted to sleep and there was a pillow, that she would use the pillow. So why didn't she? Okay, that's 10. That's enough. I'm not going to take it further than that. In the next episode, I'll be taking you through the woods, the more general observations, as I mentioned, and these are actually a lot more scary, a lot more telling. So look out for that in the next video. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.